When we talk about composition, we're talking about everything that you see as part of your image. This includes the angle that you shot it at, how far zoomed in you were. It includes the elements you chose to include. It includes where you position those elements inside the frame. There's a lot that goes into deciding what your shots should look like. And there's a lot that goes into making it look the way you hope it looks. So let's just take a look at a few images and talk about some guidelines for determining and discussing how your composition affects your message. One of the standard guidelines for composition is called the rule of thirds. So if you imagine cutting your screen into thirds, both horizontally and vertically, you've turned it into a tic-tac-toe board effectively. The rule of thirds tells us that the most interesting places in the image are where those lines cross. If you can't get something in an intersection of the two lines, then simply having it on one of the lines makes it a more interesting composition as well. So let's take a look at a few images here and see if we agree. This is the recent release of Joker, and you can see that the framing of this particular moment, he is definitely over on one side of the screen, pretty much on that right-hand third. You see the rule of thirds used all the time. If you've ever watched the evening news, it's a very common, very standard way for them to frame things, particularly when they're doing shots with over-the-shoulder graphics. Centering your subject in the frame is often considered boring, but that doesn't mean you can't ever do it. There are definitely times when it works. There are definitely times when having the subject in the center of the frame puts attention right where you want it to be. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. This is from 2001. It's an iconic scene where Dave is on his way to do battle with the computer Hal. Here in Fight Club, we've got our talent right in the middle of the screen, and they're framed any number of ways to emphasize that. Leading lines is something that's fun to play with. You take advantage of the fact that the elements inside your frame have a directionality to them, and you can use that to steer people's attention. Here our eyes are naturally drawn to the young man standing in front of the wall. This is upstairs in Iban Hall, and you can see there's a strong directionality leading into the distance. I think this was Venice, but you can definitely get a sense of directionality of the building stretching off into the distance down the canal. Controlling your focus is something that's a very powerful technique, and it's very difficult to do with the type of technology we have access to. Even with my little video cameras, playing with focus is challenging. If you're trying to do this with a smartphone or a tablet or something like that, it's really going to be difficult to pull off. However, controlling your focus can really make a profound impact on what your audience pays attention to. There's a concept called a depth of field. It talks about what's in focus besides what you're focused on, right? So if I'm 4 feet from the camera right now, things that are closer to the camera, maybe as close as 3 feet away, will also be in focus. And things behind me, like that backdrop, which might be as far as 6 feet away, are in focus. But you could definitely get an object closer to the camera so that it wouldn't be in focus. And if I were to tear down the wall here and you could see out into the hallway, what was back there wouldn't be in focus either. So that range of things that are in focus, in this case from maybe 3 feet to maybe 6 feet, that's called the depth of field. And controlling that controls what the audience can see clearly. Let's take some examples. A different interpretation of the Joker here, Heath Ledger, but you can see that his face is what we're drawn to. He's in a crowded room, but the background is out of focus so that it's not a distraction. It doesn't pull away from him. In this shot, you've got the two performers. The one who's up front and center is actually not what draws our attention. It's the one to the rear because she's in focus, and partly also because of the way her eyes are cut. It's easy to find TK421 in this shot. A video screen or a photograph is a flat medium. It's two-dimensional, and there's nothing we can do to make it be three-dimensional. It's a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional world. But we can put elements in it to remind us of that three-dimensionality. Right? By having an element in the foreground and in the background, it creates the illusion of depth where no depth actually exists. Framing talks about what is included inside the edges of your image. By zooming in and out, or moving your camera closer or farther away, by panning, tilting, repositioning, you're controlling what the audience will see and how they will see it, the direction they'll see it from, the aspect that they'll see. So playing with that can be very important in determining what it is you're trying to communicate. The wider angle on this might be useful if we were establishing who this person was or where she was located, whatever's going on in the film at this moment. The close-up might be more important if she were sharing a story, right? If she's talking and it's a private or an intimate or a painful or otherwise emotionally charged moment. Getting in closer to her face will make us feel the emotion more, whereas the wider shot removes it a little bit. This is the fountain outside of Ivanhall. The wider shot would be useful if you were trying to establish where you are, right? It shows a little bit more context. It shows the university around it. It shows the wet pavement in the background. The closer shot might be more important if the focus is the fountain itself, right? Maybe you're doing a documentary about why the fountain is there, what it represents, what the artist was trying to convey. Having a closer image where we can see more detail of the fountain would be more important than the wider area. If we were doing something that was more architectural in nature, a tour of the campus, the wider angle would definitely be appropriate. This is two Chaminade students on a field trip to New York. They are in the office, as you can tell, of the New York Times. The wider shot kind of gives a sense of what's going on around them, right? You can see people in the background. It's a little less personal. It's a little busier in a way. The closer shot isolates our two students with the headline there. So it might be a little more effective if what we're trying to do is brag about the fact that our students have made it to the New York Times. Whereas the wider angle might be more effective if we're trying to include them as part of a story, right? Perhaps the people in the background are going to approach and ask them nicely to leave. The idea of internal framing is that you can use components inside the image to further isolate parts of the image. Here, the two people at the table are somewhat isolated by the fact that there's empty wall to either side of them. We're looking through a doorway or an archway there. And a little bit more so, the one in the center is secondarily framed by the window behind her. This is another shot from The Graduate. We saw one earlier, but using that bare-skinned leg as a frame for Dustin Hoffman in the background says a lot about what's going on in this scene. You don't have to know the movie to understand what's happening at this moment. This is just a lovely landscape piece. You can see that the use of the framing there, whether that's, I think that's a trellis for plants to grow on, is isolating the landscape behind it with the trees and the clouds and the pretty lake. Choosing the angle that you'd shoot from makes a lot of difference as well. Angles imply power. They tell us things about the environment. They tell us things about the character. Shooting from a low angle gives us a sense that the subject has power, has authority, is looming over us as the viewer. Here we can see the two agents in the Matrix looking down at where Neo was supposed to be. They have missed him. They were here to capture him, and he's not there. But the power in this scene belongs to the agents and to the policemen. It belongs to the authority figures. Here we see Batman standing in smoking ruins, but despite the fact he's in smoking ruins, he is the power in this shot. He is the authority. He is here to set things right, and bad guys beware. This is from Pulp Fiction, and you can tell that in this shot, Jules has got the authority over, what was his name? Brad. Brad is in trouble. Jules is the trouble. High angles are the opposite. High angles tell us that we have power over whatever it is we're looking at. We're looking down at something that is weaker than us, something that's subordinate to us. Harry Potter is clearly in trouble here. He's on the ground and we're standing over him. It doesn't matter that he's got his wand at the ready. We're going to win. Well, okay, it's Harry Potter, so he's going to win eventually. But for this scene, he's in trouble. But I really want a puppy. Right? How's this going to turn out? This guy, the man in black, the Dread Pirate Roberts, he's helpless on the side of the cliff with the Spaniard standing over him above it. If you don't know The Princess Bride, you should definitely put that on your to-see list. You can't be much more helpless than sinking in quicksand. It does not look good for these guys. A Dutch angle is when the camera is deliberately placed crookedly. So rather than having the horizon square, you tilt it like so. This can be done a number of ways and for a number of reasons, right? It implies disorientation in a character. It can be used to suggest that something is not as it seems, right? Maybe we're looking at somebody's house and it looks like a normal suburban house, but because it's being shot with a Dutch angle, we know that there's something different going on here. Maybe there's a terrorist inside. Maybe the house belongs to a witch. We don't know yet, but we know that there's something up. After traveling through time, Bruce Willis finds himself caught in an insane asylum. Is he actually insane, or is it just the world that doesn't understand him? It's hard to be sure looking at this shot. Here we're back to Batman. He's losing control as he's interrogating the Joker. He's about to break his one and only rule of not killing villains, which, sidebar, the original Batman totally killed villains. That was what he did. But neither here nor there. In this movie, we've got the Dutch tilt because it's telling us that Batman is losing control. The world is winning. The Joker is winning. Batman is actually, despite the fact he's got his hands around the Joker's neck, Batman is losing this particular battle. Here, who hasn't been here, right? Who hasn't lost it? Sat in a public place and just wanted to scream. Don't know what's going wrong with this guy's life, but clearly he's having a hard time of it. And clearly the world is not ready to let it go. It's your job as a storyteller to have the audience look at what you want them to look at, to only see what you want to show them. Let's take a look at a few images here, and I'll just ask you the question, where does your eye go? And then the follow-up question you need to answer for yourself is, why? This again is our Chaminade student in New York, marveling at the subway system. It's his first experience with an underground tube transport, and he's marveling, right? There's a lot at play here. You've got a sharp image standing in front of a blurry background. You've got a very definite use of both leading lines and the rule of thirds. Where does your eye end up? This is an interesting shot. At a glance, it looks very happy, very normal, right? Strong composition with the rule of thirds. We have the kid on the left side of the screen. We have the woman standing in the aisle on the right side of the screen. But it's crooked, right? At second glance, there's a Dutch tilt going on here. There's something we don't know about this scene. There's something besides happy kids and a caring adult. There's something about to happen. This is a nice illustration of how using focus to draw your eye really does work. It's the same shot, more or less. The one on the left is shot with a very shallow depth of field, so only the first chess piece, that first knight, is in focus. Clearly our eye goes directly there and tends to linger there. The one on the right is shot with a wide depth of field. Everything is in focus. So if our eye does rest somewhere, it does it for different reasons. So where does your eye go? Again, this is more complicated than it seems at first. Christina Aguilera is centered in the frame here, but that's not the only reason our eye goes there, right? There's leading lines pulling us in from both sides, right? The wall on the right and the wall on the left both have a directionality that move to the center. The colors of the wall are muted, right? Everything is kind of pale and washed out, whereas Christina Aguilera is not pale, nor, well, she is actually pale, but she's not washed out, right? Her skin is almost glowing. That red dress is very vibrant. So they've manipulated a number of things, both in terms of composition and in terms of color, to make sure that our eyes go exactly where they want them to go. There have been books volumes written about the art of composition, and there is a lot to learn and a lot to think about. This is just a beginning. But as you're shooting your projects for this semester, and in fact, as you're shooting everything as you move forward, take an extra second as you're looking at the framing, as you're looking through the viewfinder or staring at the LCD screen, and ask yourself a couple of questions. Do I see everything I want to see? Do I see anything I don't want to see? And am I seeing it the way I want other people to see it? This will be something that's an ongoing discussion throughout the semester as we're critiquing your projects and as we're watching films. Composition is definitely something we'll spend a lot of time coming back to.